Okay. Okay, moving ahead to continuing with Rule 10 and white magic. The DK tells us that the two modern groups uh, that are coming into power are the psychologists and the financiers. And he says he's written two books on psychology, Esoteric Psychology 1 and 2. And in that, he goes into the makeup of the human being, the rays, the seven rays that make us up, and how they influence us. And he tells us that eventually the knowledge of the seven rays will be used by psychologists. Now, that hasn't happened yet, but more and more people are registering information of the seven rays and what they are, even a lot of people that haven't read the Bailey books. So a lot of the things that are in the Bailey books are kind of permeating consciousness, and the ideas, a lot of good ideas in the books that are just thrown around a lot. And so a lot of them are permeating consciousness of people that aren't even into the New Age things or metaphysics that much. But he says psychology deals with men's urges, their characteristics, and with their purpose, uh, the apparent and hidden purposes of his being. And then he talks about the financiers, and he says they deal with means whereby we actually exist on the physical plane, controlling all that can be converted into energy, and constituting a dictatorship over the modes of intercourse, commerce, and exchange. So in other words, the people with the money have the power, is what he's saying. And if you have money, you can actually be a little dictator. If you have money, you can start a business. You can start a business, you can hire a dozen people, and then you can be a little dictator to those dozen people. And they have to, when you say jump, they have to jump, or else you can fire them. So um, you money certainly has power. And he says the financiers will be one of the last ones to really come in and see the vision of the Aquarian age, and to really assist in bringing it into its power. Now, there's a lot of conspiracy theories around the financial people. I'm sure a lot of people here have heard uh, about conspiracies of the Illuminati and Rockefellers and New World Order and all those things that are associated with the conspiracies. And the idea behind the conspiracy is they say, well, there's this group of bankers, or sometimes they say there's a group of Jews, or there's just a group of powerful people, or Masons. People just haven't got it figured out who they are. But there's a lot of people who think there's a hidden government of very powerful people, and they say that what happened to these people is they wound up getting all the money they could get that meant anything. And after a person gets so much money, then he wants something more, and that more is power. And so the idea behind the conspiracy is that somewhere in the past, a bunch of moneyed families got together, and money wasn't enough, so they wanted power. They wanted to control the world, pretty much. And so the belief is that people like the Rothschilds and Rockefellers,
The Mellons.
yeah, big families, rich families, and international bankers, they're got this conspiracy going where they're pulling all the strings. The only problem is that I've studied this, or I've been kind of kept track of it ever since the 1960s, and every prediction made by the followers of the conspiracy as to what's going to happen next and when they're going to pull the strings and control the world has never happened. And I've concluded that the true conspiracy is dark forces that's not even in incarnation. And these dark forces will work through any group, and they're like shapeshifters. And what they do is they will work wherever there's opportunity, and then when the opportunity kind of evaporates somewhat, then they'll move on to somewhere else. Now, when Hitler showed up, that was a great opportunity, so the dark forces worked through Hitler and Nazism. And then when they were defeated, then they moved on to other areas like the Soviet Union, and that wanted to control the world. And then when the Soviet Union fell, then they move on to somewhere else. So they keep them moving, and they do work through moneyed interest to a degree, but not, I don't think it's 100% there. I don't think all bankers are, everything is controlled by the bankers. After all, look at the richest people on the planet now is Bezos and Bill Gates, and several of these people are extremely wealthy. Yet the conspiracy people say these bankers are even more wealthy than Bezos, which is a little bit hard to believe. There's stories that these international bankers have trillions of dollars at their disposal, but I don't think they're as powerful as the conspiracy people give them credit for. But I will say this: there's always things going on behind the scenes. There's always people planning things, but I don't think there's a physically organized conspiracy the way that a lot of people think. But there are, I think, behind the scenes in the unseen worlds, there is a conspiracy, but they're like shapeshifters, and they move their attention around to where different places to where they can have power. And the place that they shift to is always a place that people accept as being not a threat. And then pretty soon it does turn into a threat. Okay, any more comments on that before we move ahead there?
Yeah, if you listen to the people who are into these conspiracies, Trump is just a puppet. He doesn't think for himself, and I say to them, "You don't know Trump."
Yeah, they all say the president's just a puppet.
He's a pawn. He's a puppet. The Illuminati is all powerful and all hail, and then I said, well, show me some of these guys, and well, they're behind the scenes. You're not supposed to know.
Yeah.
They never can prove anything concretely.
Yeah, it's because I don't think there's an actual physical organization called the conspiracy or the Illuminati, but from behind the scenes, the Dark Brothers do work wherever they can find a response. It's a little bit like Brothers of Light. There's really not a true church, so to speak, or a true organization representing the hierarchy, but they'll work wherever they can find a response. During World War II, they worked with the Allies, Churchill and FDR, to try to defeat the forces of evil. So they worked where they could find a response to promote the highest good. And the evil ones do the same thing. They work wherever they can find a response to advance their ideas of selfishness and power. And I think that's the key to understanding that. Now, eventually, we will have an externalization of the hierarchy. So we will have an externalized government that actually represents the light. Now, the Dark Brothers want the opposite to happen. They want an externalized government that actually represents them. So there's a conflict between the forces of light and darkness as to who is going to rule the earth. And so by all accounts, the good guys are going to win in the end. So let's hope that's the case. But if we don't do our part, there's always a danger that things could screw up.
Yeah.
Speaking of money, DK says this about money. He says, as I've said before, it is only crystallized energy or vitality. What the Oriental student calls pranic energy. It's a concretization of etheric force. It is therefore vital energy externalized, and this form of energy is under the direction of the financial group. They are the latest group in the point of date, and their work, it should be borne in mind, is most definitely planned by the hierarchy. They are bringing about effects upon the earth which are most far-reaching. Now, he talks a little bit about this and the fact that he says in the past, people that accumulated money used it very selfishly, but slowly people that do have quite a bit of money are learning to use it more unselfishly. Like Bill Gates, he may not agree with everywhere that he donates money, but he is donating a lot of money to help third world countries and help them get water and different things like that, and nutrition for their kids. And he's doing some good stuff. And so a number of people that are do have a lot of money are thinking of positive things. Bezos isn't really big on helping third world countries type of thing like Bill Gates, but he does want to go to the moon and explore space and do things like this that can help humanity. So some of these people with money, they probably don't spend it the way you or I might if we had that much, but the way they use it isn't all bad. So more and more people are, matter of fact, a number of billionaires are getting together and talking about, instead of leaving their money to their kids, they want to leave it to good causes, which is probably a pretty good idea.
Depends what the good cause is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, some people, it kind of bugs me how much research goes into cancer and this doesn't really do anything. And then there's all kinds of people with ideas and that are really beneficial in curing cancer, and they're thrown in jail for even talking about it. So it's kind of irritating how the money is, a lot of the money, it just goes the wrong direction. Like when people take chemo and radiation, sometimes it just extends their life maybe a couple weeks, and it makes their life a living hell until they actually die. A lot of people, like my sister and brother, I had a sister and a brother that took chemo and radiation, and they went through a lot of pain before they died. And I think they would have been a lot better without it. Just died naturally. But so it's kind of, we may disagree with how the money is spent, but the important thing is that people with money spend it to the highest they know. The highest somebody else knows may be different than the highest you know. And so we can't really see the person as entirely wrong if he spends money in the area that is different than we would spend it. These groups have done well, but many of them have been corrupted by lesser minds who have taken control. To overcome this situation, the hierarchy has created a subtle group called the new group of world servers. So he says the big problem with all the groups that have surfaced in the past several centuries is they get corrupted. They start off with a good idea, and then after a while it begins to grow, begins to be successful, and then there's power struggles, and then the people who wind up leading it are people that are kind of into power more than service, and then they want their ideas incorporated. And the initiate, the person that started the group, had really the best ideas, but then now the person that's heading it, that's got the power, he thinks he's smarter than everybody else, so he throws in a bunch of his ideas and he corrupts it. So it turns out the organization starts to go downhill in efficiency. We see this in businesses, in churches and organizations. It happens again and again. And to overcome this situation, the hierarchy has started the new group of world servers, which are people that are very sensitive, that's capable of receiving impressions and then acting upon them. And the hierarchy is seeking out people that are in all the various influential groups of the planet so that they can contact these people and use these people as an influence for good within the various groups, within government, within businesses of influence. This is a major project, and they're called, like I say, the new group of world servers. And he says the personnel of this group is known only to the elder brothers of the race, and no register of names is kept. And there are only three main requirements. One is a certain amount of soul contact, and two, to be able to receive telepathic impressions from the world of souls and men. So the person needs to be sensitive to what others are thinking, as well as picking up impressions sent to them from the hierarchy. And third, a capacity for abstract or synthetic thought. So keep in mind what synthetic thought is thinking that a synthetic thinker doesn't look at a group and classify it as all right or all wrong. He will be able to see what it's doing that's right and also what it's doing that's wrong, and how maybe he can influence this for the better. And so this is basically what a synthetic person does.
He sees that all religions have a certain amount of good. One's not really a lot better than the other, but the people are doing their best by belonging to any particular religion. When you see that, then you can work with people in any religion without a judgment.
Right, and all people, there are certain things that all people have in common as far as what they see as good. Like everybody thinks to love your neighbor is a pretty good idea, unless you're maybe a dark brother. But even them will say it's a good idea because they don't want to be thought as not being righteous. But and everybody worth their salt believes in some type of higher power that's into spirituality. And so there's certain things that all of us are accept, but the thing that divides us is where we come down to thinking that you have to believe this certain thing or certain things or else you're excluded. And that's where the problem comes, and that's where all the religions have these walls up. Whereas if you're not baptized by the right authority, or if you don't have the right idea of who Jesus was, or if you don't accept the Bible as the God-breathed Word of God all the way through, then then you're not in the group. But even these people, they have these basic things in common. They believe in loving your neighbor as yourself. So if people just stay to some of the core teachings of Christ, the world would certainly be a lot better place. He says, in the past, the group workers were limited to certain rays. The new group of world servers today will be on all rays. Past groups worked somewhat blindly, but the new ones work with knowledge. The new server will be able to acquire any skill that's needed. So he says a true disciple, if he needs to acquire a skill, he will have the ability to go do that. He can acquire any skill that's needed to further the work. The true exponent of this group will not appear for many decades, he says. But, there's some of them now. Now, he says in 1935, there were only a few thousand that were influenced by the new group of world servers. There were 400 accepted disciples at that time, but 156 were equipped for group work. He says they will grow, the numbers will grow quite a bit over the years. Now, I think he made another comment in a later book that there are now thousands of disciples and thousands in the new group of world servers before he finished his communications with Alice A. Bailey to find that. But there's...
Yeah, he said something I forget if it was the latter part of the Ray's initiations. He said something about thousands of first-degree initiates at this time, and that was, I guess, his last book. So,
yeah, to qualify for a new group of world servers, he doesn't say how high of an initiate he needs to be. He says the most important thing, they need to be telepathically sensitive. Now, there's a certain number of these new group of world servers that are sensitive enough that they can actually pick up messages from the hierarchy, or maybe in the dream state they can go and attend meetings and then have somewhat of a memory of what they're supposed to come up with when awaken. A number of them probably into out-of-body travel also. You get into out-of-body travel, you could actually go attend the meetings in full consciousness. That'd be kind of cool. But the trouble with out-of-body too is some of the out-of-body people just go into the astral zone. So not all out-of-body experiences will take you where the hierarchy, in that level where the hierarchy would have their meetings. Okay. He says a new group of world servers is found throughout the entire world. And he says even though they the exponent, by exponent, he says people that actually represent them and can say, I represent the new group of world servers and I'm in contact. That won't happen for a while, but right now it's happening on more subtle levels, and people are just picking up what they can do to fulfill their part. He says the new server will be a true Aquarian with a universal touch and intense sensitivity, a highly organized mental apparatus and astral equipment which is primarily responsive to higher spiritual vibrations, a powerful and controlled energy body, and a sound physical body, though not robust in the ordinary sense of the term. The most important workers in this new group, and those who are closest to the great ones, are those whose daily thought is orientated by the new ideal. So what do you think he means when he talks about the new ideal?
Group work, teamwork, networking,
Right.
triad work.
And basically, you might add in there too goodwill. He says what's going to bring in the new age is stimulating goodwill among humanity. And this will be one of the really the great works of the new group of world servers, is to stimulate goodwill among wherever he can find a response. And goodwill leads to all kinds of things. It leads to voluntary sharing. Now, what the Dark Brothers want to do is they want to take the idea of sharing and say, you need somebody like us in control, and we'll take all the money and we'll redistribute it and according to what we think is good. Whereas the brothers of light, the brothers of light have the different approach, the fact that we want to stimulate people into sharing of their own free will, so that everybody will eventually be taken care of. The trouble is when you have a central authority that dictates how much you have to share and how much you have to give, the incentive disappears, and it turns out that nobody winds up with abundance. When things are done by free will, then abundance begins to be amplified, and everybody eventually can be taken care of.
You know, Joe, that's what tithing was instituted for, is to share. Just because you don't want to give to a central church or an organization doesn't negate the value of giving 10% of what you make out to people in need, just to share and say, hey, here's someone that could use $100. Say I made $1,000. Here's $100, 10% I'm going to give to this person. And doing that of your own free will, I think, is in accordance to the principle you're talking about.
Yeah, ancient Israel, the only tax they had was tithing, and that was by free will. And by free will, given 10%, financed the entire nation.
Yeah.
And
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
In Dungeons and Dragons, some versions of it, paladins and priests tithe 10% when they come into town. So there was this video game, wherever you came into town, your cleric character would have to give 10%. So what you did is you pooled all the money and gave it to a non-cleric character, so you didn't get hit with that 10% tithe when you went into town.
Okay. Interesting.
Sounds like stuff that I'm always referring to as oneness. Like
good to see you, Rick.
When Jesus taught, be one with him, be one with the Father, I think that's what he's talking about, the stuff we're talking about, goodwill towards others. Because goodwill towards others develops oneness and telepathy and stuff like that.
Yeah. Now he talks about that each person has a piece of the plan that they can pick up. And the new group of world servers proceed to think through into objective manifestation that aspect of the vision which is their mission to vivify into form. Now, all of us have some aspect that we can pick up. So that's what each of us needs to do, is to look, to try to tune in to what our part is as a person, and vivify that into form, make it happen. And there's something that everybody can do something, whether person's insider in a new group of world servers or not. There's always some step you can take to bring the kingdom of God closer to earth. He says they are equipped to organize slowly and steadily that public opinion which will eventually divorce man from religious sectarianism, national exclusiveness, and racial biases. You know, we made a lot of progress since 1935 on race, but we don't really acknowledge it. A lot of people try to amplify this, and instead of looking at the progress we made, they talk about how we're all still a bunch of racists. But you look back in 1935 when this was written, there was a lot more racial tension back then than there is now. Now it's we have to overcome illusion more than anything. But most people are pretty accepting of a lot more accepting of different races and different thinking than they were when DK wrote this. And we need to give ourselves a little accolades for that, but recognition for that. But there's still we've still got a long way to go. What do you think he talks about the things that divide us. What divides us? What do you think is the real dividing points now? Because right now in America, especially, the Democrats and Republicans, left and right, are really divided. Where is the real division there? And and it's not race, because even though there's a lot of accusations of race, most people are pretty accepting of other races. We made a lot of progress, not perfect, but I would submit that was a big problem in DK's time, but the problem is different now. What is the problem?
Whenever you see yourself different from someone else, it creates a problem. And in politics, they see themselves different than the other people.
Yeah, they just see the other guy as the enemy. You know, there's people who go to family reunions and wind up being mad at each other because they didn't vote for the right guy. And that's happening a lot more now than
a big division.
Why is this happening?
A big division in the masses is the have and the have-nots. Everybody's wanting to be a superstar or a super athlete or a millionaire. So you're getting that division of the haves and the have-nots. And that's playing a big strain on the masses right now.
Now, remember what I said earlier is the true conspiracy is of the dark brothers on the other side, and they work wherever they can find a response. Now we look at where there's a tremendous division, and there you can find where they're working. And right now, when I was a kid, there was really big divisions in religion, but now the religious people are kind of somewhat united. But it's the political people that are divided. So
I'd say
that, let me just finish the sentence. That tells us this point is that the Dark Brothers have seen an opportunity to divide. Their idea is to divide and conquer. So they saw an opportunity to divide. How are they doing that? Okay, somebody had a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the main thing from my perspective is like narratives and the media mostly, because I mean, despite people have different, political ideas and stuff, I don't think that there's the degree of hostility or difference that the media portrays and then forwards. Like constantly saying the other side's racist or a bigot creates this widening alienation. And there's also like the tech companies censorship stuff going on that makes you afraid to talk about certain things, or that you're going to lose your job for having this view that was acceptable 10 years ago or stuff like that. So I think it's basically about creating this wedge of people not being able to talk to each other because the other side's bad or whatever.
Yeah, I think the focus of evil right now is actually the media.
The media wants to create this divide.
The media wants to create this division. It's good for their news.
Rating.
It's good for their ratings,
They want to sell their
and it
products.
makes them feel important.
They want to sell their products and have a greater audience, so they have to fan the fires.
Yeah, they want the Republicans and Democrats to hate each other, the liberal, the right and left, and this hate is manufactured because we don't have as much reason to hate now as we did 50 years ago. We had a lot more reason 50, 60 years ago to hate each other than we do now. But this, in my opinion, the reasons for the division and the hate are manufactured.
Yeah,
And
by the media.
they're manufactured for a purpose, and that is to divide and conquer. If the Dark Brothers, the Dark Forces can divide us enough, then they can use this division to enter in with their people and assume control. And that's where the real conspiracy is, and it's not organized physically upon the earth. It's organized.
Russia's actually trying to do similar stuff to that too. Actually, now that I think of it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore.
Language has always been divisive in the past, but within my lifetime, that's starting to go away. It's like you can start up an English conversation with anybody in the world just about these days.
Yeah. So getting back to this, the new group of world servers, their focus will be on goodwill, and this is really needed more than at any time maybe in history, is that the workers of light have to step forward and teach the basic principle of loving your neighbor like yourself, of having goodwill and accepting people. It doesn't matter who they voted for. It doesn't matter if they're left or right, but look upon the Christ within them, teaching that principle of looking upon the Christ in your neighbor. We need to go back to that. And someone needs to start a movement in that direction. Maybe we can eventually, who knows, but somebody, there needs to be a lot more focus on this. And I think if DK were here, he'd be somewhat disappointed more progress in promoting goodwill hasn't been made.
I think we have to recognize the goodwill that already exists and give power to the goodwill that is.
That's true too. Yeah.
10, 12 years ago, there was this movement where they had this song called "We Are the World," and many of the popular singers played this song, and it was played on TV, and it was very powerful. And I think that we need to play that over and over again. We are the world. We are the people, and that uniting effort that they made has to be emphasized.
Yeah, that was one effort that was made. That was a good idea, and we need to have more stuff like that going on.
We don't have to give power to the appearance world of these things.
Yeah, that's right. Energy follows thought, so we need to put our focus on goodwill and loving our neighbors ourselves, seeing the Christ in people that are different from ourselves. Okay, he says the workers of light and the new group of world servers must seek and find group leaders who truly want to serve humanity rather than self, and try to stimulate them in the right direction. Now, where are these people? Is this feasible? Let's say, I think in business that's kind of possible. You can find people in business and they want to do what's right and stuff like that. But let's look at politics. can we find Democrats and Republicans that we can get a hold of and say, hey, let's have some goodwill toward the other party and get some cooperation in that way. And the trouble is, some of these guys just don't want to have goodwill. They have they're almost feed on that negative energy. So it's something we need to do more. People can write letters to their paper, their editor, they write their congressman, but we need to get these politicians focused on promoting goodwill rather than ill will. Okay, he says we must seek out those on the same. Yeah. Somebody have something?
I was going to say one thing about politicians. As soon as they get into office, they have to dip their hands in the blood of the other politicians because they're all on the take, basically. And if they don't play the game, they're booted out or they're not accepted in the circle because these politicians have their hands so far in the blood they can't get away from it.
Yeah, the whole system needs to be the whole system needs to be changed so they can be more independent, because once they get in there, if they don't follow what everybody thinks they should follow in the leadership, then they get ostracized and they don't raise enough funds to get reelected. So
there has to be some tragedy in the world to bring out the goodwill of the people. There seems like when everyone's satisfied, they're always out for their own self-interest, but they seem to come together when there's some group, some world tragedy.
Yeah, when 9/11 happened, everybody was really united for about 2 weeks. Then they went back to normal. But yeah, 911 really united everybody for a while. Everybody was flying a flag in their neighborhood, and everybody was singing "Kumbaya" together. And I guess it lasted maybe a month. But after a month or so, then they went back to hating each other.
I just saw a video today where this high school girl decided that, there's never any good news in the newspaper. So she created her own newspaper that's only for happy news. And she's got subscribers all around the world now. She only puts it out quarterly, but she's got subscribers. I mean, people want to hear good news for a change.
Is she being able to be profitable off it?
She puts any money she makes, she puts it back into the project. She's not interested in making money. She's just doing it because she thinks it's a good thing to do. And I really smiled on that one. She's really found her job.
Have you guys heard how the KKK was defeated? Pretty much.
You mean like last century?
Yeah.
When you talk about
it hasn't had much power for, I don't know, decades, but yeah, at the beginning of the last century, it had a lot of power, and what really hurt it was comedians started making fun of it and started making jokes about it and humiliating them, so people were almost ashamed to be associated with it because they were the butt of humor. And I thought that was an interesting approach. And maybe this is what the new group of world servers needs to do to the extremes of in politics, is to make fun of them. Now, the trouble with late night TV, they've changed from being comedians into attack dogs, so they're not even being funny. But we need to get back to the good humor again, and we need to make fun of the people that are being ridiculous. There's a lot of people being ridiculous in their political thinking and their political attacks, and I think there's a great opportunity for the servers with a good sense of humor to change thinking by applying humor.
You need to create a TV show.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to see movies and TV shows created where they actually talk about these things, and they talk about these things in such, they could talk about these things in such a way that they could show the unreasonableness of what's going on. And
That's kind of what Steven Crowder does.
is it? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we're near the end of our session here. Any comments or questions before we wrap it up?
Yeah, just pay attention to strong emotional bias. You know, drop your bias. I think that's what the thrust of what you're saying is see both sides objectively, follow the highest you know, and let your intuition be your guide.
Yeah.
But don't be biased. You know, that strong emotional bias that you see through the media. That's where their influence is. You get some of those people up there that can really spin an emotional web around an idea, even if it's false. People believe it.
Yeah, and we shouldn't be discouraged because of the tension that's out there either, because we're reaching a great point of tension and something's going to have to happen. Something's going to have to give. And so things are going to change. And if we do our part, it will be for the better. If we don't do our part, it will be for the worse. But things are leading up and getting tight. And so there's something going to happen in the next few years that will change the course of history.
Over the next election.
Right. That next election is going to be something.
We need to give power to the good and look at life with pure reason and not as a partisan.
That's true. Okay. Okay, everybody. We'll see you.